The paint was still tacky on my Bentley when the deputies walked her out in handcuffs, a red smear running down the quarter panel I had hand-sanded for weeks, looking like somebody spray-painted a warning across a headstone. And yeah, that happened. The same person who mailed me a stack of citations at sunrise tried to tow my car at 7:26 a.m. and ended the day explaining herself to law enforcement while the whole neighborhood watched. I didn't plan any of this. I just write things down. Dates, names, receipts. And if you're wondering how it got this far, let me roll it back to the morning. The flatbed set my 1964 Bentley S3 Continental in my driveway, and the silence of a house without Marta felt like you could hear the studs breathe. I'm Calvin Reed, 56, retired airframe riveter, moved to Raven Oaks because the brochure said tree-lined and community, and I told myself I could live with an HOA if it meant quiet. Keep the lawn short, no carnival in the front yard. Okay. I can do that. And then she came up the sidewalk like a storm in heels, tablet tucked under her arm like a badge white. Lexus idling. Smile. Practiced, inoperable vehicles may not be stored in view of the street. You have 72 hours, she said. Snap, snap, snap went the phone camera. And I stared at the car and back at her and said, "It's been here 20 minutes, but Colleen Drake, HOA president, had already turned to go circling the block 3 slow times, measuring me with that look people get when they've already decided who you are." The first citations felt like mosquito bites commercial vehicle storage because a hydraulic engine hoist got delivered noise complaint at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, when all I'd done was sweep improper waste disposal for flattened cardboard by on Friday. I owed $400 to a phrase called aesthetic harmony, which tastes like rust. When you say it out loud, and I told myself to breathe. Wave at neighbors. Be courteous with noise and fluids. You know what I mean? Then code enforcement showed up with the exhausted politeness of someone who has heard every lie. 17 calls in 10 days. Same number, he said. Looked at my labeled cans and dry floor and sighed. This is clearly a personal restoration, not a shop. And for 1 second, I thought common sense would win. It didn't, because the next morning my insurance called with that courtroom voice about anonymous reports of commercial activity, and it took 2 hours to convince a person who maybe had never changed a spark plug that I wasn't running Jiffy Lube. Then Adult Protective Services knocked kind professional, but still a welfare check about my mental health. Since my wife died, they looked at my kitchen, the tidy garage, my hands, and said gently that I seemed fine. And when the door shut, I felt humiliation bloom in my ribs like a bruise I couldn't rub out. 2 nights later, at 11:19 p.m., my security camera pinged, and there she was in a windbreaker with a flashlight testing my garage door handle, peering at the oil cabinet, taking pictures she had no right to take. And the next day, a certified letter arrived from something called the Ridgeview Property Integrity Council with a P.O., box return address, and an emergency hearing notice, which the postal clerk later told me had been rented in cash yesterday by a lady who didn't want to give a real address. Official neighborhood business my foot. That's when I called our old estate attorney, Aaron Soto, and sent him everything. Citations, screenshots, camera stills, the call report from code enforcement. And he called back with that unhurried smile of a man who likes paperwork. 2 things, Calvin. The state has a hobby restoration allowance for private property. If you're not a business, and I found the 1990 founding covenants for Raven Oaks with a grandfather clause protecting restoration of vehicles over 25 years, so long as you keep fluids contained and the area tidy, which is exactly what you're doing. And for the first time in weeks, I slept. Then woke up to the Lexus doing its slow parade lap again, and decided if this was a game, we were going to keep score. I turned my dining table into a war room, put every citation in a sleeve, built a spreadsheet with dates and departments and outcomes, printed the state allowance, and the founding covenants, taped my oil recycling receipts to a folder. And right on cue, the pattern got uglier, because Nate, my UPS neighbor with a back like rebar, knocked and showed me a recording where Colleen offered him $500 to sign a statement about paint fumes and kids. Then Mrs. Ellison, from the corner, said Colleen asked if I'd been erratic since Marta passed. Writing things down like grief was a lever to pull, and I kept asking why this much effort over a clean garage and an old car, until I looked up my parcel on the county assessor's website and saw the mixed-use overlay like a highlighter stroke across our block. A blurry pre-application in the file dated the same week as my first citation. Representative Drake Realty Partners, and the anger I'd been carrying cooled into something harder. After that, the false reports fell like hail. Environmental Services. The Fire Marshal Department of Ecology. Each time I opened the door, showed labeled cans and sealed containers and a dry floor, and each time a professional shook their head. Sir, this is cleaner than most shops. Whoever is calling is wasting public resources. So I took names and incident numbers and stapled them to my timeline. Then someone slashed the tires on my daily driver at an angle that would fool an adjuster and chalked last warning on my driveway. So I added 2 more cameras, one under the eave and one inside a birdhouse a kid down the street built for school. And the next morning, a tow truck rolled up before coffee with a work order that said abandoned vehicle and immediate impound pending owner notification. So I turned the key and let 12 cylinders make their case, and the driver tore the paper in half and apologized while I tucked the carbon into a sleeve like a souvenir. Aaron pulled property records and told me Colleen was leveraged across 3 investments and tied to projections that looked awfully pretty. If our street went mixed use, Nate brought another recording where her voice got brisk and honest, in a way people do when they think the room is theirs. If I can document instability, the board can force action. People who help tend to sell fast and above ask. And I built a slide deck like a detective timeline. Columns, founding covenant, highlights, state code, assessor, screenshots with the overlay, the 11. 19 p.m. still of her hand on my door. A note from the postal clerk about the P.O. box. Even a statement from my mail carrier, who said she photographed my parts deliveries and claimed HOA authority over commercial packages, which is not how the United States Postal Service works. Then I called the community weekly and asked to be put on the HOA agenda. 2 days before the meeting, I caught her in my backyard photographing oily rags with a long lens. "You're trespassing," I said. And she didn't even turn around. "I'm conducting an environmental assessment. HOA authority supersedes individual property rights in health matters." And when I told her to leave, she tried to bait me. "Everyone knows you've been unstable since Marta died," she said, easy as weather, and walked off. And my hands shook until I reminded myself that paper beats gossip and process beats panic. So I filed a police report, sent the video to Aaron, asked 3 neighbors to write down what they'd seen, and waited. The community room at the Raven Oaks Activity Center felt like a beehive that night. Folding chairs from the church coffee in foam cups, a camera crew pretending to be invisible. Colleen behind a plastic table with a little gavel and a stack of papers. Emergency discussion of ongoing enforcement challenges. She said, tight smile, and Mrs. Yellison lifted her hand, without waiting, before violations here. Maybe we address your midnight strolls and phone calls to agencies, and the room made that low sound. A room makes when it's ready to stop pretending. I walked to the front, set my binder down, and said, "Let's talk about facts." Then put the timeline on the wall. Dates, calls, incident numbers, outcomes, and said, "Every agency found nothing. Everyone documented." The caller clicked to the founding covenants with the restoration clause, glowing in yellow. Clicked again to the state law. Clicked again to the assessor screenshot, with the mixed-use overlay and the representative line. Reading Drake Realty Partners. "This isn't about a car," I said. "It's about a deal that needed my address," and that's when she reached for the filthiest lever. "He's been unstable since his wife died," she said. And the air changed. People who had buried someone they loved went still, the way a lake goes still before a storm. I kept my voice even. "I miss my wife. I also know how to keep a floor clean." Then put the 11:19 p.m. photo on the wall, the P.O. box receipt side by side with the fake committee letter, and let the silence work. Play it. Someone called, and Nate hit his phone, and her voice filled the room. "If I can document instability, the board can force action. People who help tend to sell fast and above ass, and there's no word for the sound a crowd makes when a lie falls apart. But you know it when you hear it. Because right then, 2 deputies walked in, unhurried like men, who knew why they were there, and the shorter one said, 'Ms. Colleen Drake.' And then, 'You are under arrest for mail tampering, filing false reports, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud.' And the handcuffs clicked while the room breathed out. Not a celebration. Not yet just the sound of gravity doing what it always does. Outside, the red spray still felt gummy under my thumb, and someone whispered, 'You're going to repaint that whole panel, aren't you?' And I said, 'Probably that's the thing about doing it right. Sometimes you start again. And that's where I'll leave it. Because the rest is committees and interim leadership and neighbors who suddenly looked each other in the eyes again, not exactly a victory parade, more like a town realizing it had a spine. And if you're asking what I learned, it's simple. Power without process becomes bullying. Paper with dates and names has a way of beating speeches. Grief is not a defect, and a neighborhood isn't an investment product. It's a place people live. Now it's your turn. Tell me if this felt like justice or overreach, if HOAs in your town protect standards or protect property values for the folks with the right last names. Drop your city. Tell me what you've seen. Push back. If you think I'm wrong, share your own story. If a rule book saved your block or got used like a weapon, keep it civil. Keep it honest. And if you've got receipts, bring them. Bring.